The brony community overall has a mixed reaction to the concept of Equestria Girls, mostly because of how accustomed they are to ponies and how much they don't find humans very interesting. Rainbow Rocks they consider a superior movie because it fits a lot of the issues they had with Equestria Girls. But how do these movies hold up for somebody who's never seen the My Little Pony series? I can link you to one video that puts a little perspective on this idea, but I'd like to think for myself what are some observations that make sense or don't make sense from the point of view of a non-brony. First of all, for someone who's not into My Little Pony and who's never followed it, they don't have any investment in the ponies and would find human characters more relatable than animal characters. Therefore, the fact that these characters are not ponies and are not in a magical fantasy setting is not a factor into the ruining of the enjoyment of the movie for the non-brony. In fact, it may be a plus. Next is all of the background characters who resemble ponies from the series. The fact that when you look through the crowd of humans, you can instantly recognize and get excited about the appearances of Vinyl Scratch, the CMC, Diamond Tiara, Silver Spoon, Photo Finish, and a great plethora of others. All of these background cameos are just for the fans. Trixie is just for the fans. Lyra and Bonbon playing piano is for the fans. Octavia is for the fans. For somebody who's never watched My Little Pony, the background characters are meaningless. Also, there's a lot of guides in Equestria Girls and Rainbow Rocks, like Pinkie Pie wishing she had a party cannon. These are references to the show that go over the heads of those of us who have never seen the original series. However, one thing that you get with Equestria Girls at the very least is you very quickly get introduced to these ponies and who they are. As Twilight goes into the human world, she has to reintroduce herself to each of her friends, and the outsider gets to see them brought in and developed over the course of the two movies. So we very clearly understand who each character is, what their names are, and what their personalities are. So if you've never seen either of the two series, you pick up on who these characters are right away. As an outsider, you also never saw anything before season 3. So you don't have knowledge of what Twilight was like before she had her wings and before she became a princess. All you have is a couple of lines at the beginning of the episode explaining that Twilight didn't always used to have wings and didn't always used to be a princess. That's really all you need to know about Twilight, but it still raises the question of what was Twilight before now? And that's not addressed in either of the movies. In fact, it's not addressed at all in Rainbow Rocks if you see that without seeing Equestria Girls first. Which you are expected to know Equestria Girls first going into Rainbow Rocks because it begins at the exact point when that movie ends and has references to that movie and plot stuff that you had to have seen in the first movie in order to follow what's happening in the second one. Without knowing the first movie, it might even feel as if the ponies come out of nowhere and serve no purpose to the story. And you wouldn't know who Princess Celestia was or what they mean about the gateway between the two worlds opening or not opening or whatever, or what they mean by the gateway between the two worlds not opening for a long time, and all the stuff about the many moons and the other world and all this stuff. There's a lot in Rainbow Rocks that you need to have seen the first movie in order to follow it. But you should still be able to watch both movies without seeing the Pony series itself. And the ending of Rainbow Rocks is also going to be connected to the setup of the next movie, whatever it happens to be. If you were going to tell Rainbow Rocks as a story all on its own, you would have to cut the Pony segment out completely and jump straight to Twilight being called upon and having her come in as a knowledgeable expert of mythology who knows something about the sirens. You would have to cut out all of the references to this strange other world and simply tell a story of good versus evil and bands versus other bands. Rainbow Rocks would completely confuse an audience who has never seen Equestria Girls and doesn't know what happened previously. However, if you take the movie starting from when Twilight arrives back in the human world and continue it forward, then all of the confusing stuff that happens in Rainbow Rocks is removed and you don't have to worry about it. Everything that happens after the arrival of Twilight is all stuff that can be comprehended by an audience who doesn't need to know that a world of magical ponies exists, and who also doesn't need to know that the previous movie was a thing that happened. Although there are still things that linger from Equestria Girls that affects Rainbow Rocks, like Sunset Shimmer's past. Although I think she references what her past was and what she did in the last movie enough that you don't necessarily need to have watched that movie. You just have to understand that Sunset Shimmer tried to do something and she failed and she changed and she's better for it, but she hasn't been forgiven. It's hard to say whether or not all of the things that I've said would make sense to an audience who's never seen the first movie. I feel pretty confident that Equestria Girls stands on its own with no other pony shows or pony movies a lot better than Rainbow Rocks does. Rainbow Rocks is the more interesting movie, but I don't know if it could be watched completely standalone without any prior exposure to any previous pony or human series. The thing that Rainbow Rocks has going for it is that the Battle of the Bands idea can be interesting to non-pony fans as well as regular people. Is that the thing that Rainbow Rocks has going for it is that the Battle of the Bands can be interesting to non-bronies as well as to bronies. It doesn't need a whole lot of setup to follow what's going on. I think you can pick things up pretty well as both movies play out, but you'll probably be following the Equestria Girls more so than Rainbow Rocks, which might be a little bit more confusing to the uninitiated. Equestria Girls reminds me of is movies like He-Man, Beastmasters, and the Smurfs, where they spend a few minutes in a fantasy world, and then they get teleported somehow to the real world, and the rest of their adventures happen in the real world with the characters being this sort of fish out of water thing, experiencing technology and the light for the first time and trying to comprehend it. Rainbow Rocks being the movie where the outsider is already familiar with that world and can return to it without having to go through the fish out of water scene. But what Rainbow Rocks does is it references a lot of stuff that happened in the past that you sort of need to know about. If you cut the pony stuff out of both movies and stick just with the human stuff, both of them could work a lot better for non-bronies, so they wouldn't have to play catch-up and try to figure out what's happening. The reference humor has a much higher appeal to bronies than it does to non-bronies, who non-bronies would know that the jokes are referencing things, but they wouldn't know what the jokes were referencing. But both movies still have a good number of moments that non-bronies can enjoy too. Let me know what you think of the comparison of Rainbow Rocks, Equestria Girls, and other such movies, and whether or not non-bronies can enjoy these two movies, or whether they're better off with some serious editing. Either way, the Equestria Girls and Rainbow Rocks shows are a great deal better than the movies done by Monsters High. Which Monsters High is a good idea on paper, it's just a lousy presentation as a series, a movie, and a toy line. It needs a ton of work to improve it, and should take notes from Hotel Transylvania. Anyhow, thank you for watching, and good night.